All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to get started. We wanted to make sure you had time to grab some snacks and some drinks. If you haven't had a chance, please help yourself to some desserts. If you need the restrooms, they're down the hall to my left, and then you're going to take another hard left, and they're just back there, tucked in a corner. So please do what you need to make yourself comfortable this evening. I am Dr. Brittany Tausen. I am an associate professor of psychology, and I am one of the primary investigators on an Educating Character Initiative grant from Wake Forest University and the Lilly Endowment. It is this grant that has helped to make this entire week of events that we've planned here at Seattle Pacific University possible. Along with my co-PIs, Dr. Thane Erickson and Dr. Crystal Jalali-Chersky, we are working to coordinate and enhance efforts at Seattle Pacific University to lean more fully into our mission to graduate students of both competence and character. A primary aspect of our work is to deeply consider the experiences that our students have both inside and outside the classroom. It is our hope that during their time at SPU, students aren't simply asked to think about character in their courses, but rather that they are exposed meaningfully to situations and stories that prompt them to think more deeply about how to be a better human in the world, that give them chances and opportunities to grow and strengthen their own character. This growth takes repetition and intention. It takes an overhaul of narratives of self-sufficiency, scarcity, isolation, greed, fear, and self-interest. It takes real human encounters. It takes community. It takes exposure to discomfort and disheartening situations that invite us to grow in virtues like faith, hope, and love, courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom. When SPU is at its best, we are doing this work with our own warm welcomes. Yes, you are welcome here. Yes, Jesus loves you. Yes, you deserve to feel safe and seen and celebrated and supported. It is only with our own faithful yeses that we can truly walk alongside students in this work to grow and cultivate character for a greater good. As you might expect, creating these types of experiences is no small task, and it requires a whole lot of individual yeses. So because gratitude is a virtue, and because big events make me painfully aware of how inept I am at event planning, I get to share some of my own gratitudes with you this evening. To start, to my co-PIs, Dr. Thane Erickson and Dr. Crystal Jalali-Chersky, without whom this grant would not exist and I would not be standing upright. Thank you. To Sara, Shaban, and Alyssa Walter, two people I'm lucky enough to call friends who were willing to help me dream about this entire week of events and had the historical and political acumen to think about this particular week as one that would be critically important for us to be having a conversation about refugees and forced displacement. Thank you. To Dr. Katie Tangenberg, to Joanne Flett, to Dr. Katie Douglas, to Dr. Nicole Zion, soon to be. Thank you for always encouraging me to dream bigger, for supporting me, and for helping me to believe that things like this are possible, even here and even now. To Kristen Brown for saying thank you, to saying yes to this entire event from the very beginning. You threw your support behind it, and it made all of the difference. Thank you. To Tiffany Acker from the Faith Formation Project, who could double as a party planner and also a mind reader with her ability to anticipate needs and also to pay attention to details. Thank you. And to Jeff Cuse and Pivot Northwest, who generously provided resources to ensure that we have this beautiful space and yummy treats for our time together this evening. Thank you. I also want to thank all of the professors that gave talks and shared their expertise and experiences with us this week. To Drs. Brian Luyoyo, Mohammed Kadam Shah, Alyssa Walter, Raphael Mandesur, Ruth Ediger, Bo Lem, and Sara Shaban again. Thank you. And for every single professor who took groups of students through the home-to-home exhibit and believed in the power of this experience. The exhibit itself is a powerfully immersive way to learn about the challenges and choices that refugees have to face as they're trying to flee or escape persecution. This exhibit would not have existed on our campus if it weren't for one particular person, Michael Chu. Michael was the real MVP. He navigated every event planning checklist, every logistical hoop, and every pipe and drape shortage. And there were many. To the team of folks at World Relief, to Hannah and Medard, to Haley and Tim, Maddie and Effie, and all of the staff who helped to walk our students through this incredible experience. Thank you for your yes. Thank you for this incredible peek into the meaningful and mission-filled work of Jesus Christ that you all do every single day. And finally, to our SPU students, thank you for being you. Thank you for showing up to volunteer. Thank you for participating in talks and bringing your curiosities and your questions, for sharing your stories, and for engaging with your whole hearts. Psychological research tells us that empathy is a choice. It's not about whether you are or are not empathic. It's whether you value empathy and embrace situations that will stretch you beyond your own experience of the world into the experience of somebody else's world. One of the most prominent ways we can choose empathy is to turn towards one another when they are in pain, or when we are in pain, we can share our pain with others. To put ourselves proximal to the pain of others is to exercise our empathy muscles. It is what allows us to grow in our likeness to Christ. This week, when decisions are being made to turn a blind eye to those in need, those fleeing persecution and war and violence, we are a witness. I am a product of a generation deeply shaped by Hillsong United worship music, and an impact of that music was further cemented during my study abroad in Australia. And as I was praying about my hopes for this week, my heart kept coming back to this lyric in a song called Hosanna. Heal my heart and make it clean. Open up my eyes to the things unseen. Show me how to love like you have loved me. Break my heart for what breaks yours. Everything I am for your kingdom's cause. As I walk from earth into eternity. This is my prayer for my students. It's my prayer for me. It's my prayer for all of us. Lord, please break our hearts for what breaks yours. Let us be a group of people that rise up in selfless faith. Let us be a group of people that embrace others with open arms and open hearts and warm welcomes. Let us not be driven by fear, but by faith, not by desperation, but by hope, not by actions of exclusion and isolation, but by a generous and radically inclusive hospitality. Lord, show us how to love like you have loved us. I now have the honor of inviting President Deana Porterfield to the stage to introduce our guest speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. I don't want to lose your clicker here, so I'm just going to put it right there. And I want to begin by just thanking Dr. Brittany Tausen and the team. And we haven't really clapped. She was naming all the names. And so let's clap and give a thank you for all of the work that she and others have done. This team has been dedicated to creating a comprehensive and interactive learning experience for our community. And this week's events are part of Educating Character Initiative grant that we received, as she mentioned, and a broader effort to deepen our understanding and engagement in global issues. Earlier this week, the President's Cabinet and I had the opportunity to participate in the Home to Home exhibit. And as we debriefed with facilitators, we heard from one of our very own SPU alumna who came to the U.S. as a refugee and now works with World Relief, helping to create a warm welcome for others. It was a powerful reminder to each of us that every person carries a story we may not yet know. So why did we host a week-long event on our campus, and why does it matter to SPU? And I want to share that with you because we do a lot of things, and the things we do are because they matter to us. So this experiential learning opportunity fosters global awareness, empathy, and compassion, while also shaping character by challenging our perspectives, cultivating resilience, and inspiring a deeper sense of responsibility towards others. In the classroom and through events like this, we aim to bring you face to face with some of the world's most urgent challenges, cultivating virtues like faith and hope and love that equip us to leave with compassion and conviction. If our students are empowered to change the world through their SPU experience, they must first understand the world. Needing to know and needing the knowledge and insight to engage with the pressing issues of our time. The United Nations estimates that more than 120 million people are currently displaced worldwide, with that number continuing to rise. This is one of those complex and pressing issues that we must pay attention to. SPU's vibrant Christian community is a place where we learn about how Christ compels us to love the world, to reimagine what is possible, and boldly co-create hopeful futures with courage, innovation, and compassion. Tonight, it is my honor to introduce our speaker for the evening, Medard Ngueita, Executive Director of World Relief, Western Washington. Medard, originally from Chad, was granted asylum in the United States with his family in 2007. His journey with World Relief Western Washington began as a program participant, later transitioning into the hospitality industry. Throughout his career, his commitment to serving the most vulnerable has remained central to his work. He eventually joined World Relief Western Washington as an employee, and over the past 12 years has gained a deep understanding of refugee resettlement. Today, Medard leads the organization as executive director, overseeing offices in Bellingham, Olympia, and Kent. Medard holds a Master of Arts in International Community Development from Northwest University, a Bachelor's in Human Geography from the University in Cameroon, and he is also earned a certificate in High Performance Leadership from Cornell University, among other leadership training credentials. In addition, he served on the inaugural King County Refugee and Immigrant Commission and participated as a delegate at the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2008. Medard currently leads the advisory board for World Relief Western Washington and serves on the boards of the Global Leadership Forum and the Seattle Pacific University Board of Trustees. In 2002, he had the honor of being SPU's undergraduate commencement speaker, and he continues to speak at various engagements, universities, and conferences across the country. Medard believes in a just world where every open door of opportunity should lead to new opportunities for many, regardless of their background. He firmly holds that every human being has a God-given talent and ability that can contribute to a better world. Please join me in welcoming our speaker for this evening.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Porterfield, for the introduction. And thank you, everybody, for having me here. It's a real pleasure and a humbling opportunity for me to share with you with what's going on in our world these days. We are in an intersection of roads where things are challenging, and we do definitely live in a world that is really broken, full of crises that we all need to respond to. The greed of money, greed of power, greed of wanting to be more important than others has led our world into a space where we have some developed countries and poor countries and developing countries. The systems that the human beings have created to organize or to orchestrate those things, those divides and those differences are what brought us to where we are. Many crises in the world. But there aren't just bad people in the world. There are also some good people, some good organizations who are trying their best to address those crises. In 2022, UNICEF has put out a report of their work from 2000 to 2022, where they showed that the child mortality rate has been getting better. And so it decreased by 51%. And that means that our world, the mortality rate for children between the age of 0 and 5 has gotten better. But it is not at the level that we would like to see. Though better, it's still a crisis that should be a concern to all of us. The United Nations, in their Sustainable Development Goals, have set different measures that they want to see the changes in terms of what should our world look like. And their goal number 1, which was to reduce the poverty in the world, their report for the people living at $1.90 per day has decreased over time. It was 36% of people in the global population in 1990. That rate went down to 16% in 2010 of the global of the population, the world population living at or below $1.90, and it went down to 10% in 2015. Now that's a positive progress. But it is still hard, because when you take the global population right now, and 10% of the people on the face of the earth are living at or below $1.90, we're talking of a number of about 8 million people. Yes, it is a positive progress, but it's still something that should perplex all of us. In their sustainable goal, development goal number 6, which is to provide clean water, clean drinking water for the people in the world, have also changed in a positive direction. That progress between 2015 to 2022 went from 69% of people around the globe who have access to water, to clean water, to 73%. That's also a progress, but still very far away, because that means that 17% of the people on the face of the globe still do not have access to clean water. And that's a crisis that should concern all of us. Meanwhile, global displacement, the main issue that we'll be talking about today, has been increasing in a negative direction. In a negative direction in a sense that things are more alarming today than they used to be a couple years ago. I wanted to share with you these 2 statistics, 2021 and 2024, in terms of forced displacement. In 2021, 89 million people in the face of the globe were forcibly displaced. of that number, 53 million of them were internally displaced. That means they are still within the borders of their own country, but not where they would call home. So they were forced to leave, but they still remain in the borders of their country. 27 million of the forcibly displaced people worldwide were refugees. That's those who were registered by UNHCR, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. 4 million of them were seeking asylum. Now, that's 2021. Now, look at 2024. We're talking about 3 years in between here. We went from 89 million to over 120 million. So to be precise, 122 million people forcibly displaced on the face of the globe. That number in 2021, if you go a little bit back, in 2000, at the beginning of that year of 2021, that number was only 79 million forcibly displaced. So by the end of that year, 10 million more got added. And then we're now at 122. So it is getting worse. While I presented other crises that we should all be concerned about, we're making progress as good people, good organizations in the world. But for mass displacement is really alarming, and we should be concerned about. It is rising. Now, facing all those crises, World Relief, which is a Christian global humanitarian organization, has been boldly engaging the world's greatest crisis since over 80 years in partnership with the church to address those crises. Let it be on the soils of the United States or around the world. All those crises are where we as a Christian organization felt called into. We ran into it boldly and we engaged them and we do our part. Of course, we cannot do it without the church. So in partnership with the church, we have been doing this work on the face of the earth for over 80 years now. Here in Western Washington, our work with refugees and immigrants has been around since 1979. And we approach that work of creating that space of welcoming for refugees and immigrants through the philosophy of co-powerment and listening to the community. It is really important. We were founded here in Western Washington to respond to those fleeing war in Southeast Asia. And so since then we have grown. You have heard President Porterfield talking about our 3 offices in Western Washington. And we serve not just those who fled war in Southeast Asia. These days we serve refugees, we serve asylees, asylum seekers, and other immigrants. And as we walk alongside them together with the local church, they rebuild a sense of life. And all of us need to be a part of it. Now, our mission as an organization in Western Washington is to see every single refugee and immigrant be welcomed by community, rooted in community, and empowered for community. Now, you can see community all over here because this is a call to all of us. We, as a welcoming community, should create that space for our new neighbors to feel as they do belong, and that this become their community as well, but creating space for them to be empowered to be a part of that community. That's what we believe in. Now, this work, this vision of the work that we're doing is informed by our Christian values, the Christian principles, the biblical foundation, which calls us into creating a space where every refugee and immigrant can feel welcome, rooted, and empowered for community. Now, you may be wondering, what are some of those Christian principle values, right? I have a list of few of them here, from Genesis all the way to Revelation. What does God say about refugees and immigrants? I highlighted some that I wanted to share with you. In Exodus 23, verse 9, this is what we read out of the Bible. Do not oppress a foreigner. Do not oppress a foreigner, no matter who they are, where they come from. Do not oppress a foreigner. And a foreigner here is a refugee, an immigrant, somebody who's from outside, who's part of our community. You yourselves know how it feels like, because you were foreigner in the land of Egypt. Now, God is reminding the children of Israel here that they should not be oppressing refugees and immigrants and the foreigner or the sojourners, the stranger, because they are not a stranger to that. They were once foreigners in the land of Egypt, and they know it, they feel it. They should not be ignoring what that means to create a space of welcome, rooted and empowered for the strangers among them. Deuteronomy 10, verse 18 to 19 tells us this, that God defends the cause of the fatherless, the widow, and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing. And here is the commandment for us. And you are to love those who are foreigners. Again, you yourselves were foreigners in the land of Egypt. And so he talks about how he loves them, and now giving us an assignment that we are to love those foreigners as well. Malachi 3, verse 5. This is God saying something here to all of us. So, I will come to put you on trial. I will be quick to testify against sorcerers, adulterers, and perjurers, against those who defraud laborers of their wages, who oppress the widow and fatherless, and deprive the foreigners among you of justice. This is God saying that he's going to stand if we don't show justice to the foreigners residing among us. And it continues. This is Jesus. In his teaching out of Matthew chapter 25, verse 33, he says this, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in." Now, in this teaching, I stopped right at just the verse 35. But as it continues, they were wondering, so when did we see you thirsty or hungry or naked and we did all of those things? When did we see you as a stranger and we invite you in? And here is Jesus' answer to them. Anytime you do these things to the least among you, my brothers and sisters among you, you're doing it to me. Now, Jesus himself is identifying himself as a stranger, as a naked person, as somebody hungry, somebody who needs some food, who needs water to drink. And that any time you do this to somebody else, you're doing it to me. Now, that takes us back to Genesis 1, verse 27 to 28, where it says that God created man and a woman to his image. And here is Jesus identifying himself as our brothers and sisters. And whenever we do these things to the least among us, those who need us, the foreigners, the sojourners, the slaves, we are doing it to him as well. Very interesting thing here. Romans 12, verse 13 goes like this. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Share with the God's people who are in need. Who are the God's people among us who are in need? Worldwide, who are in need? Are we showing them hospitality when we come across them? Last but not least, Hebrews 13, verse 2. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some have welcomed angels without knowing it. What a great warning. We don't know who are the people that we come across, who are our new neighbors, who are the refugees and immigrants in our community. They may be angels if we open our doors to welcome them in. If we create a space where they feel welcome, we create a space where they belong, we may be serving God himself. We may be serving angels without realizing it. Now, with that ground on the biblical principles and the biblical mandate for the work that we do, to which we call all of you to be a part of, who is it that we're serving in Western Washington? Now, we talked about refugees, and I said we serve asylees, asylum seekers, and other immigrants. Refugee here is the definition of who a refugee is. A refugee is someone who has crossed an international border and cannot return to their home country due to a well-founded fear of persecution. And the persecution can be based on their race, nationality, their religious belief, their affiliation to any social groups, their political opinion, like Medard standing here today talking with you, coming all the way from Chad, who just happened to have a political opinion that is different from the leaders of his country and had to be forced to flee the country. Just because you think differently and you're speaking up for others. Just because you are from a different nationality. Just because you pray a certain way, it's a ground for persecution. And when we have those people who cross that international border, those are the people we call refugees. Now, our conversation today will be focused more on refugees, but I wanted to provide some background as well, because the way that I structure my presentation today is the first part is more focused on information and education for all of us, and then the second part is where we'll be engaging in discussion and questions, and that will maybe get more into details of the things. But I approach it in a way that I take everybody as, let's give as much information as we can and not remain somewhere way up here where some other people may be lost in the concepts. And so a refugee is that definition that we have, somebody with a well-founded persecution who had fled their country, crossed an international border due to the persecution of their race, nationality, religious belief, the fact that they belong to a certain social group or political opinion. Now, an asylum seeker is also somebody who fled their country, found themselves into another country under the same reasons. They have a well-founded fear of persecution, and that persecution can be grounded under those same reasons, because of their race, nationality, social groups, political opinion, or because of the way that they pray, and that is a ground of persecution. Now, when people are seeking asylum in a country, during that time, until a decision is made on their case, after studying if that fear of persecution is really well-founded, they are called asylum seekers. And once it is granted, either by the immigration judge or by the U.S. agent, the U.S. CIS agent, they become asylee. So you go from asylum seeker in that process of demonstrating, of proving your fear of persecution to become an asylee. So asylum seeker, asylee, and refugee. We also serve people that we call SIV holders. SIV stands for Special Immigrant Visa. Now, those, as of now, are given to two countries, used to be given to two countries, Iraq and Afghanistan. Now it's only Afghanistan. And SIV is Special Immigrant Visa is given to people from those two countries who happen to work with the U.S. government in their country. And that is a ground of persecution because they are being seen as traitors to their own countries, and therefore their lives are in danger, and the United States gives them that special immigrant visa. And when they get here, we get to walk alongside them together with the church to serve them. And then we have another group of immigrants. Now, under immigrants, you have a variety of people here. There are different status within immigrant, but basically an immigrant is somebody who left their country either because of the persecution, either because they are looking for a better life, and they are among us, immigrants. Now, within the immigrants, there are some terminologies going around, illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants, which I'm not going to get into that much, but within immigrants themselves, talking about Medard standing here in front of you this evening. When I came to the U.S., I entered the U.S. with legal documents, which brought me through the airport. And then while here, I filed for asylum. I was an asylum seeker. Now, until my decision is made, because the visa can expire at some point, people may call me illegal because the decision has not been made on my case yet. But I am well documented when I got into the country. And so, again, a lot of education for all of us when it comes to those different terminologies, including our own leaders, because they need to be well educated on how are we seeing other people who in the very first place were created to God's image. And sometimes we tend to forget it because the children of Israel forget it as well, and God has to remind them again and again and again, do not forget that you were once a foreigner in the land of Egypt. Now, with that being said, of the people that we serve, I wanted to take you a little bit through the process. How do refugees get here? By the way, of all those categories, refugees are the most vetted ever people to enter this country, the safest people to be around, because they go through intense process that gets them into this country. And here is the process. From overseas until they get here and until an organization like World Relief gets, and the church gets to walk alongside them as they build a sense of life, they have to leave their homeland, so their home country. They cross an international border. Some of them get to a refugee camp. Some remain in an urban area. And it is at that point that they go through the paperwork to prove the case of them being refugees. Now, once they get into another country and they prove their well-founded fear of persecution and get registered by UNHCR, which is a branch of United Nations, but under what is called High Commissioner for Refugees. So UNHCR stands for United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. UNHCR will register them. And some of the people, the refugees, as we look at the numbers earlier, the refugees, the 68 million refugees that we looked at, some of them, less than 1% of them will ever get a chance to be resettled in a third country, like United States. After going through that intense screening, UNHCR will refer them to a country like United States, and they go through other screening sets with the United States government branches, including Homeland Security, and including the Department of State, and the screening about their health conditions. And that's why refugees are the most vetted people entering this country, not only based on their fear of persecution, but also on their health. Are they gonna be a problem for the public health? All of those things they go through. Then after that, when the United States decide that, yes, this person is safe, we can resettle them, then they refer them to a resettlement agencies, which we are one of them. There are 10 of those resettlement agencies nationally that contract with the state to resettle refugees. Most of them are also faith-based, but we, World Relief, is the only one who is identified as evangelical Christian organization. So we are a corporation of the National Association of the Evangelicals. Then once we get the reference of those families from the State Department, we get ready. We call the churches, we let them know we have these families coming on this day, here is the size of the family, we assign a caseworker that will get ready to go to the airport, pick up the family, we find out an apartment for them, or a temporary home, which is mostly provided by the churches, church volunteers on what we call the host homes. Then we pick up the families from the airport, and the resettlement begins. Now, what does the resettlement look like when we say the resettlement begins? These are some of the many services that we do offer to refugees when we pick them up from the airport. Things like making sure that kids are enrolled in school, making sure that adults are enrolled in ESL classes and job classes, making sure that they have a doctor and we take them to doctor appointments, making sure they even know how to take the public transportation. And you will be surprised, some of the refugees spend years and years, generations in the refugee camp. And so it is also about showing them how you use a toilet. And all of that is done through the community. All of that is done in a partnership with the church. All of that is done through the volunteers who know what does the Bible teach them about their neighbors and who can stand up and come and be friends to them, because the thing that they are looking for the most is a relationship, a friendship. Some of you have gone through our From Home to Home exhibit, and you know that you have to leave some of your family members back home. Sometimes they die on the road as you're crossing the desert or whatever it is to get into a refugee camp somewhere. And so you get here and you need some new friends. And that's what the community comes together to provide. And within that friendship, within that relationship, the way that we identify it and we call it at World Relief is that it is a mutually transformative relationship. And that's the design of God's ingenuity when he creates men and women to his image, but he has distributed the gifts and talents to each of us according to his grace so that we build relationships and we depend on each other. And as we meet with those refugees and immigrants, we get transformed while they also get transformed. Here is a story, a little story for you in terms of transformation. You know, I come from Chad. I'm from a different culture. And the way that we do things is different than Americans. So when we got here, my wife, 3 months after she got here, she gave birth to our very first child, who happened to be, by the way, in the room with us, Mateo. I did not plan on this, so I have my son here with us. He was born just 3 months after my wife got into the country. And we were just newly married couple. We didn't know what we were doing, what parenting looks like. And we were new here, trying to learn English, 2 jobs, full-time school, just few hours of sleep every night. And we're trying to figure it out. But you know what got us through? It's the group of volunteers from the churches who come and spend time with us, who sometimes can come during the day and take Mateo and sit with him in the living room so that my wife can get an hour or 2 hours of sleep because the night was white. We didn't sleep. But in that mutually transformative relationships, in Chad, when you see someone skinny, and at some point they start putting meat on their bones, that's a good sign of social life, right? Things are good. They are healthy. They have less problem. You know, they are living. And so one of our volunteers, again, in those moments of cultural learning and transformations, one of our volunteers came by. We haven't seen each other for a couple months, couple weeks, and I said, wow, you're looking good. Life is good. You're putting some meat on the bone. Now, it seems like you don't say things like that in America to people. You don't say things like that to people in America. Whereas in my country, that's a compliment. And so it's a good sign of life. But then this volunteer told me, hey, Medard, thanks for saying that. But you don't say things like that to people in America. Worse, let it be a woman. You don't say it to a woman. And so while she learned that if she happened to be in Chad one day, she would compliment somebody that she sees weeks later putting meat on the bone because it's a good sign. But I also learned that here, I got transformed, that here you don't say that to somebody else. So next time I had to hold that back. So those are the moments of that, mutually transformative relationships that happen when people get here. I wanted to give you some numbers in terms of resettlement. Over the last 10 years, our country, United States, has resettled 540,000 refugees in the United States over the lifespan of 10 years. Of that number, 24,000 of them arrived to Washington State. And look at what World Relief Western Washington has done. Almost 9,000 of them came through World Relief Western Washington. That's about a third of everybody who came to Washington State. That's the work that we do. And we were able to do that because we do this work in partnership with the church, unlike other organizations, because the church knows their calling. What is it that God says about immigrants and refugees coming into our community? Of that number, I wanted to show you what it represents on a year-by-year basis. In 2014, our offices have resettled 786 people. And in 2021, it was 261. Just last year, this fiscal year, by the way, these numbers are federal fiscal years. And so they go from October 1st to September 30th. So these are the numbers of people that we have resettled. And within that, that's because every year, the laws of the United States have given a unilateral power to the president to decide on what is called the presidential ceiling, determination ceiling. Meaning every president, every year will say, okay, this year I'm going to admit this many refugees. That's the power that has been given to them. And they can set that number to 0. They can set it to 100. President Jimmy Carter in 1980, when the Refugee Act was signed, the U.S. Refugee Act was signed, he signed that presidential determination over 200,000 people. But we as a nation resettled 200,000. President Biden, the past fiscal year, by which we served 1,572, he set that number at 125,000 people to be admitted, and 100,000 of them arrived. Now, the presidential determination is an aspirational number, but we rarely get to that number. So just to give you some context here. Now, again, last year we welcomed, as newly arrived families, we welcomed 1,578, but we did serve about 10,000 people. Now, you will be wondering, what does that mean? Now, remember back, I told you that we served refugees, but we also serve other immigrants in the community, including asylees and asylum seekers, because our programs and services are designed to serve not just newly arrived refugees, but other immigrants in the community in partnership with the church. And so we had almost 10,000 beneficiaries of our programs and services. Oops, what did I do? In our programs. Now, what lays ahead? We just had a presidential election. We just had a presidential inauguration, and we have a new administration in office. Now remember, I just said that presidents have been given a unilateral power of decision to decide how many refugees they can admit every single year. They can also say that I don't want to have refugees coming. So we have an executive order that came out that President Trump has signed on Monday, which will go into effect Monday 27. That executive order puts a halt on the refugee admission programs, meaning that the refugee admission program is closed as of now. No refugee will be coming starting Monday. We have many families that have been scheduled to arrive whose flight travel have been canceled and they won't be coming. Most of our funding, because we work with refugees, most of our funding comes from the federal government. We do raise a lot through churches and individuals within the community as well, but because the funds that we receive through the federal government is in relationship to the refugees that are arriving. And so that is also being threatened right now. President Trump has also talked about mass deportation of immigrants in our community. That's also our concern. As we serve not only refugees, but also other immigrants in the community, that's our concern. And we're talking about a mass deportation that ever in the history of our country. Now, when we talk about deportation of immigrants, let us be sure of something. We're not just talking about somebody who may not have a document or who got here through the border without having been allowed into the country. Those people do have families in our communities. And that means if we move forward with this, some families will be separated. And those are the things that we're dealing with right now in terms of what is laying ahead and where are we all heading as a community in Western Washington, which I will be sharing with you some of the ways. But before I get to that, I want to deconstruct some myths here for us when it comes to refugees and immigrants. We hear, rhetorics to a point where refugees and immigrants drain our economy. We hear a lot about things like that. But here is the fact. In February of 2024, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has produced a report of a study that they conducted over 15 years span, from 2005 to 2019. And on that research from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, they have proven that within that time, the time window of 15 years, refugees and asylees alone have contributed by nearly $124 billion into the American economy. When we're talking about them draining the economy, that's the reality that we need to wrap our minds around it when we hear something's being talked about, what is actually the fact. And this is a research that was done by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Another report that was produced around the same time has proven that refugees on average, an adult refugee who is valid to work, within 20 years of their arrival, they contributed by $21,000 more in tax than what they have received when they get here. Now, speaking of what they have received, some of you may also be wondering, what is it that they receive? Per refugee, we get $1,650 per refugee to serve them. And it's a one-time grant. It is not an ongoing thing. And now, research has proven that 20 years from the time that they arrive, they contribute by more than $21,000 in tax, more than what they have received. And that's a fact. We also hear things about refugees and immigrants being at the source of crime rates in our communities. Yes, like anybody, US-born, immigrant, refugee, people are people. But the fact is this, that refugees actually, from a report that was produced by the Proceedings of National Academy of Science in 2020, says that refugees are less likely to commit crime than native-born individuals. Now, this study was done in the state of Texas, which, by the way, is the only state that tracks crime per immigration status, the only state in the United States. And as they look at this report, they did this research and produced this report, they prove that refugees are less likely to commit crime than native-born individuals. And in that same report, they have proven that areas with high level of immigrant populations have lower crime rate. And so that's the fact that we need to understand. Now, we also hear things about refugees are taking jobs from American citizens. Yes, because they also need to pay tax and they need to take care of their families. But the reality is that they are taking jobs in areas where US-born people don't want to take jobs. So mostly in agriculture, in hospitality industries, and in construction. In fact, a report that was produced by American Immigration Council is that 15% of people in the construction, 17% of people in hospitality industries, and 26% of people in agriculture are refugees and immigrants. And therefore, when they do that, they create a space for US-born people to take on other jobs, and it all built into running our economy in the country. We also hear things about refugees being a threat to the security, the national security. Cato Institute have produced this report on a study that was conducted between 1975 and 2023, that the majority of immigrants are not a threat to the US security. In fact, they have proven that that the chances of having any terrorism attack on the soils of the US by a foreigner is 1 out of 4.5 million a year. 1 out of 4.5 million a year for a foreign-born to conduct a terrorism attack on the soils of the US. We also hear things about people don't want pastors to preach about refugees and immigrants, but that is not true. Lifeway Research produced a report in January of 2024, just this year, that 82% of Christians want to hear sermons that are focused on refugees and on the values regarding refugees and US immigration. 70% of Christians believe that they should care for refugees and foreigners. Those are good statistics that we need to hear in terms of what are the facts. Now, I'm closing here before we move to the second part. How can you be involved in this season where there is so much going on? We do believe in the power of prayer. We do believe in the power of prayer. Though we do not control the outcomes, we are called to remain faithful to God, and we know that the fruit only comes from Him. And so we call all of you to support us in prayer, to pray on behalf of refugees and immigrants, to pray so that the executive orders that I shared with you can be reversed. That first executive order that puts a halt on refugee arrivals, refugee admissions, is set now for 90 days to be reevaluated. Now, we have hope in that as we continue to pray and press onto God's grace to change heart so that that word can be reversed, if not before, by the end of the 90 days. We ask you to advocate. It is important. Martin Luther King said something that perplexed me and caught my attention. He said that our lives begin to end the day that we remain silent before the things that matter. Our lives begin to end on the day that we remain silent in front of about the things that matter. That means if refugees and immigrants are things that matter, and they matter to God and to all of us, this is a time where we should not be remaining silent. We all have the power and the privilege to change the course of things through advocating for refugees and immigrants. That QR code will take you to the Christian statement on refugee resettlement, which we have on our website. And if you can join us in that movement on signing that Christian statement on refugee and immigrants so that we can put it on the desk of President Trump and people around him to tell them about what it means for us as Christians to see refugees being resettled. Partner with us, join us in this movement so we can do it together, and you can contribute financially with the effort that is being done here in our region in Western Washington. With that being said, thank you for this first part, and we'll be moving to the next part.
Hello? Okay. Medard, thank you so much for everything that you've shared. I know I've had the privilege of hearing your story before, but it doesn't get old. My name is Dr. Sara Shaban. I am an assistant professor of communication here at Seattle Pacific University.
And my name is Bo Lim. I'm a professor of Old Testament here at SPU, and I'm also the special advisor for diversity and inclusion.
So they keep giving me a microphone, okay? So my question is, and I was really encouraged by the statistics that you mentioned towards the end about the way that some pastors are responding to what's happening in our country regarding immigration and refugees. But there's also a lot of research that shows specifically that white evangelicals are opposed to immigrants more than any other religious demographic. And that there was a poll in 2015 being a pivotal year because that was the Syrian refugee crisis, where, again, evangelicals specifically said Scripture had no impact on their views towards immigration reform. So that hits me really hard, specifically because, as you know, both of my parents are immigrants, and my father went from being an imam, a Muslim, to being a pastor in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, because of the love that was shown to him by Christians. And now I see him being faced with people, he came here legally, telling him to go back to his country. So one of the calls that you had was for us to speak up. How can we approach other evangelicals during this time specifically when we're hearing things about how Scripture doesn't have any impact on their feelings towards immigration? It was a long question.
Yeah, no, it was a long question, but a very interesting one, in a sense that I think sometimes when we are passionate about something, we tend to be aggressive about it without realizing it as well, because passion carries us, right? And so when we get into those conversations where we know that people are rejecting this idea of refugees and immigrants, it is important that we listen to them. What is it about refugees and immigrants that makes you have that feeling? Do you have any experience with refugees and immigrants? Because in most cases, people put their fear on, and they do not approach people who are different than them. They did not get to know who is it that we're talking about. And they remain in that space with their fear without having the courage of taking the step to get to know the other person. We had a church volunteer who was involved with our programs with the Afghan women sewing class. So we have a program that we brought together Afghan women and helped them to learn how to sew and things. And then They practice English. But also it is an opportunity for them because culturally, Afghans have the tendency of not letting their wives go out with other people that they don't know. And so we created and tailored this specific program that brings only the Afghan women together. The volunteers who were supporting with that program were church members. And at the end, it's a cohort that they go through together. At the end of the couple weeks of working with these women, they walk away saying that when she was giving her testimony back to us, crying that I had no idea when people talk about Muslims in this way. And it was only through that experience of practicing English and helping them to learn how to sew that I came to realize how wonderful a person they are. Now, we do know that God creates opportunities. But unless we let ourselves get into those opportunities, we wouldn't know what the outcome can be. And we all have so much of what I call the unnecessary excuses, like Moses did with God, where he didn't want to go to Pharaoh and talk to him because he has a flawed mouth and cannot speak eloquently and things. Ignoring that, no, God knows all about that about you before he asks you to go. And so we usually bring those excuses to limit ourselves and let the fear take over. And so I think it would be great to listen to those people, to understand where they are coming from, and going from there to tell them your own experience and inviting them to take that first step so that they get to know who refugees and immigrants really are, instead of trying to win an argument with people who already have a wall built into their understanding.
Thank you. Medard, you cited a number of scriptures in regard to how Christians ought to care for the stranger immigrant. You cited Romans 12:13. It did strike me, and here I think there's an honest question that some Christians are asking is, well, you turn over to Romans 13, it says, be subject to your government, right? And so today, immigration, there was internal displacement, but a lot of this involves crossing geopolitical borders. So I guess my question is this, I think what happens in regard to the question of immigration is, well, what about my duty to my government? And so how should U.S. Christians think about their citizenship as they engage this issue about immigration?
Great question. Yes, we as believers, again, the Bible is a very big book. And it has so many things that sometimes even the same thing that you read today, you think you understand it. Tomorrow when you read it again, you have a different perspective. Oh, wait, what is God really trying to tell me here? And that's why Joshua 1:8 says that, do not let this book of law be far away from you. Meditate on it day and night, so that and that day and night is that the more you read it, the better you understand it. And so the Bible calls us to pray for the kings, the worldly kings and people who are governing us. That's our calling as Christians, to be submissive to them. And it is therefore important that we continue to pray for them, as you said. But also, as people are thinking about their citizenship and the border of their own country, sometimes we forget that we are all citizens of this world and that we are all passing through it. And if God himself has put on that cloth of being an immigrant through Jesus, leaving heaven to earth, willingly making himself an immigrant, but also who happened to turn out to be an incarnation of persecution, when baby Jesus had to be taken to Egypt to save his life, because King Herod was going to kill all the babies 2 years and less. Something is being shown and taught here to all of us as believers, that if Christ himself, who can turn nothing into something, who will carry his own cross even though he doesn't have to, is showing us that example of learning to love each other as brothers and sisters, and that we should remain open to welcome strangers and to take care of them and to create a space for them. Christians need to know that that's where our calling is. And yes, fear is true. But remember, when the story of Good Samaritan in the Bible, he had no idea what can happen by taking care of this man on the side of the road. But he put himself there to take care of him. And those are the pictures that we as believers, Christians, should be wrestling with and thinking, should I keep people out or should I create space for people, as Jesus taught us through that story of the Good Samaritan. World Relief is vouching for a safe and secure border. Let us make no mistake on that. But we wanted it to be done in a way that is more humankind. We wanted it to be in a way that creates a process through which people can have that chance of having their lives being saved because they are running away from persecution. We're not calling for an open border where there is no process. And again, as we talk about refugees, which is shut down right now, one of the most vetted process by which people get into this country, that means we're getting it all mixed up over here. And we need to take a step back and reflect on what all these things do mean to us.
Thank you.
So Dr. Walter mentioned in her talk yesterday that I think there are at least 10,000 refugees that were supposed to come into the United States, and that's been halted since. World Relief is a bipartisan organization. And given what this executive order means, how is World Relief responding to that? How are you depoliticizing immigration and refugees? Because it's a very politically charged subject.
Thank you, Dr. Sara, for that question. I think it is really interesting that you say that World Relief is a bipartisan organization. But I want to take a step out here and make a correction, if you allow me to.
That's what the website says.
We are a non-partisan organization, not a bipartisan organization. Non-partisan in a sense that, yes, there are two major political parties in this country, Democrats and Republicans, but there are also independents and many other. Tea Party, we have heard different types of parties. So we are a non-partisan organization. We stand behind our Christian values and Christian and biblical principles. That means it does not matter which party is leading our country. We will pray for whoever is in that Oval Office, for God to give them wisdom and a compassionate heart that can stand for the values that we stand for. When they roll out a policy that goes against those values, those biblical principles, then we speak up. And here is how we have proven that. President Trump on Monday put out that executive order that puts a halt onto U.S. refugee admission programs, USRAP. And we did put out a statement that we disagree with this policy. President Biden, in 2021, President Biden, during the campaign, talked about raising the presidential determination ceiling. Now, in that first year, when he entered the Oval Office in January of 2021, the last year of fiscal year, President Trump, as he was heading out, set that ceiling at 15,000. President Biden came in and went with the 15,000. And we had put out a statement holding him accountable to it because we disagree with him that U.S. has a lot of potentials and capacity to take more than 15,000, and he cannot be doing that. We spoke out about it. President Biden made the asylum-seeking process harder by keeping asylum seekers who are coming through the southern border into Mexico. We spoke up on that, and we held him accountable to it. So we do not root for any political party. We are a non-partisan, but we stand for policies that go against the values, the Christian values that we have, the biblical principles that we stand for. Whenever whoever is leading this country and goes against it, we speak up against it. So those are a few examples that shows that we are a non-partisan, and we stand for the right policies.
I was hoping you would bring up your statement, so it was really good.
And on that anonymous comment I was sharing with Medard, I think the last time we had a kind of event and partnership like this was 2017. I was a chaplain at the time, and the first Muslim ban had come out, for those of you who remember that memory, and World Relief had to pivot and adjust and so forth. They've changed under the Biden administration, they're changing now, and if anything, I just incredible admiration for Medard and this organization that still serves in vastly changing situations. I'm ask a sort of practical question, and you said it's about churches partnering, Christians partnering with World Relief to make this happen. Can you share about, you shared a little bit, but just some concrete ways of partnership between World Relief and churches that possibly we can get involved in, and our congregations can get involved in?
Yes, the work of refugee resettlement is a partnership, public and private partnership. And in our case, that private partnership goes mainly with the church and organizations that believe in that biblical stand. But also it involves the community at large. The work is not possible without the church, which is why our mission statement is to boldly engage the world's greatest crisis in partnership with the church. There are many churches in the community that we work with, and the practical ways by which we do this work of partnership, serving and seeing his kingdom being advanced, is to open up, is for those churches and church members to volunteer, serving with taking families to different appointments, but also welcoming them into their own homes, serving meal and sharing together. Here is an example of one church that just happened to come into my mind because we work with so many churches, and this is not to say that this is the particular church or the church, but it is the example that came into my mind. We work in partnership with Rainier Avenue Church, which happened to be one of our Good Neighbor Team's churches. And Good Neighbor Team is a group of church members who sign up as a group and get trained so that we can assign a family, a refugee family to them, and they provide those services, the resettlement services that I put up earlier with so many bubbles on it. They help take on that, and they help the families find jobs and places to live. Now, Rainier Avenue Church, a couple years ago, through their Good Neighbor Team, resettled a family from Afghanistan. A gentleman who came with his wife and I think 4 kids at that point. They came, and Rainier Church happened to have a house on the church property, which they opened it up, and the family lived in there for a few months before the church helped them find an apartment. Last year, I had a humbling privilege to go to Rainier Church to give a sermon there, and the coincidence was that that family just got their citizenship granted. And he came back to the church to share with the church, a Muslim program participant, to come back to the church, and this is what he shared on that day that I have, on that Sunday that I came to share as well at the church. And he shared in front of the congregation that he and his family, as Muslim, came into this country, and the very first friend that they had was this church. And he came to share with the church that through their prayers and support, he got his citizenship granted. And he came back to say thank you. And because of their prayer, they are now U.S. citizens. And so that's one of the many examples of the ways by which the church has played this role in this resettlement. And it's not only, like I said, Rainier Avenue Church. We have many churches that are doing Good Neighbor Team. In this particular season, many churches that are taking special offerings to support the work because of this sudden cut that we're talking about. We served 10,000 people last year. Only 1,500 of them were newly arrived refugees. And so many other immigrants and refugees who have been living in our community for years will rely on those services and programs for their better integration in the community. And so there are many practical ways by which the church is doing this work with us.
I think we have time for at least one more question. Going back to the bubbles that you had, there was lots of bubbles up there. We have great students. I'll just go ahead and brag about them. I think they're pretty great. And they love to serve. And not just our students, but maybe people who don't feel like they can contribute monetarily in a way that they feel like is meaningful, even though we know everything helps. What are some tangible ways that they can volunteer? I know that there's a space for you to fill out a volunteer form. What kinds of things would they be involved in if they were to volunteer?
And I can agree with you more. You're not just bragging about the students at SPU, by the way. They definitely are great students. And this university, which again I had the humbling privilege to get to know closely, is one of the best universities that people can get in and to get rooted into the Word and to know what is it that God is calling them through their education to become and to serve the world. President Porterfield shared earlier about one of the alumni of this school, who happened to be one of our employees, and she's in the room as well. Effie is on staff at World Relief Western Washington. She interned with us, and this university has been sending so many interns through our internship program. And all of them, as they go through, many become employees of our organization. And so we're doing this work of partnership, of building the future leaders of the community and of the society. There are many ways by which they can be part of what we're doing. We have internship program, like I said. People can sign up to be volunteers, one-time volunteers to come and help set up apartments for families. It is true that right now with the executive orders, we're not going to see families arriving at least for the next 90 days, but the work is still there. We have people who sign up to do tutoring to some of the kids and to help some families practice English, take them into the parks, and to just be friends, because at the end of the day, relationship is what people are really looking for. And so there are many practical ways that people can serve and can be involved. Because again, every single human being created in God's image has something special about them. And when you get to connect with them, there is that magical thing that happens that builds you up as a person, changes the way that you see other human beings, and that's also a way of being transformed by being friends, by being cultural companions, and by being tutors to some of those children, just spending some time together. And by the way, refugee families are the most hospitable people, because when you get to them, they want to make sure that at least you drink a tea or something. And it's around those moments that people exchange conversations and get to know each other. So,
Yes, if they offer you something to eat, you better eat.
Well, I think our time is up. If I ask another question, we're going to go way over time. I want to respect that. Can we do this? I think there are some World Relief staff in the back as well, right? Could you wave your hands if you're World Relief staff? So can we give a round of thanks to Medard and World Relief staff, right? I'm assuming they'll be sticking around to answer any questions if you're interested in more involvement, so forth. And so with that, I have the privilege of dismissing us out. So can we do this? Can we all stand? And it feels appropriate that I'll close this in a word of prayer. And after that, feel free that there's some snacks, engage in some fellowship, continue some conversations, learn more about World Relief and their work and the ways in which you can get involved. But please join me in a word of prayer. Lord, we are grateful that we serve a God whose love has no borders, and a God, as Medard shared, was willing to incarnate himself in the form of flesh, and one who himself was a border crosser, one who himself was vulnerable and created a people whose very identity was one of a pilgrim people. Thank you for that reminder today through Medard's presentation that we are a pilgrim people, that we are sojourners ourselves, and that we then have the privilege of serving others who are sojourners, perhaps even in our midst. We offer a prayer on behalf of the team of World Relief and all those who are doing this good work. We do pray for our new administration. We do pray for mercy. We do pray for the opening up of refugee settlement. And we just pray, Lord, that we as your people might and get engaged and serve. So thank you for this evening, for all that we've taken, and I pray, Lord, that this might not only inform us, but call us to action. We pray all things in the name of your Son, Jesus, and all of God's people said, amen. Thanks for coming.